if you can spread your arms apart on the floor, make sure you have that much space on the floor. Other than that, you should be fine. All right, go ahead and lie on your back, please. And I'm going to mute everyone right now. And go ahead and just take your time and just start to let your weight settle into the floor, and then starting to sense the floor with yourself and bringing attention to yourself, to your body, and notice the texture of the floor with the back of yourself. And so just feel, if you're lying on the yoga mat, just can you feel the texture of the yoga mat? And what parts of your body, and do you shift your attention to first? Head, your arms, your hips, your legs. Okay, and from that, wherever you start, and shift your attention to another part of yourself, and then start to just to feel your body and one part, and move to another part. And sensing the weight and the amount of the contact you have. Okay, so if you're at your feet, and sense the weight of your feet and the difference between the right and the left. How does the right foot and the heel and sinks into the floor, or contacts and touch the floor, or how does the floor receive the weight of the heel, and compares the difference between the right and the left. Which one feels lighter, which one feels heavier. And you can just move your attention to maybe your lower legs, and do the same scanning, sensing the weight and sensing the sensation and the contact and the difference, right and the left, and moving upward to the thighs. And move to the hips and the pelvis, weight. And if you're in the class last week, and do you recall which side received or had more weight? Which side are you leaning onto last week? And how do you sense yourself today in the weight? Anything different? Does it feel the same way? It's the same side, has, again, it's the same side as the heavier. If it is the heavier last week on the right side, is it still the same, or is it different today? And now notice your lower back. Notice the space behind your back. And how much space today, and how much space was there last week, if you're in a class last week. Then if it's not so clear to you, and how much space there is behind your back, and feel free to slide your hand and to feel, to check the amount of the space, and to check how you perceive the space and what it is actually, and how close that your perception and with what you actually see and reality. And now moving on to the higher part of the spine, and notice how the spine starts to shift and come a little closer to the floor and touches the floor and contact, and the weight changes as the spine moves upward and towards the mid back and towards the upper back into the neck. And so you notice you can kind of see and feel the shape based on how you can sense the amount of the weight on the floor. And then if you have done the Feldenkrais classes, then you know that when we start the scanning and how the spine receives or sinks into the floor, and how much of the contact, and it changes as you go through a sequence of the movements. And when you come back to the class again, and then when you start the scanning, and how is it, how's the shape of the spine, and how's the contact of the spine? Is it the same as the last time? Is it changing? So moving up to the head. Notice the head, the weight, how much weight, where's the weight? And if you get uncomfortable at any point, and feel free to change the position of your legs, and it can be a little uncomfortable for some people lying down on your back the whole time. So feel free to do what you need to do to take care of yourself. Okay. You can always, you're not going to really miss anything by not participating to the movements, and instead you are taking care of yourself by changing the positions and listening to your own comfort. And so that's actually going to serve you better, because it's going to allow you to pay attention and feel and perceive more clearly while you're doing the movement. So you're really not going to miss anything when you have to stop and take a rest, okay, during the lesson. So so sense the entire length of the spine, and then just to get a sense of the amount of the contact, and how is the weight distributed along the entire spine, and what's the shape of the spine. And feel your arms from the shoulder to the fingertips, the right arm and the left arm, and compare the difference in the sensation, and how you perceive the length of your right arm, and how do you perceive the length of your left arm. Which arm feels longer? Feels longer. Well, maybe it is a little bit longer, but maybe it feels longer. It's your sensation. And if you compare the right side of your torso and left side of your torso, from the shoulder to the hip, feel the right side and feel the left side. Which side feels longer? And how you feel and perceive the length of your torso, does that have anything to do with how you perceive the length of your arm? Is there any relationship? If you perceive your right arm being the longer side and it's the same side of the torso, is that the side that you feel longer? Or is it the opposite? And now, same questions, and compare the legs and the length of your legs, right and the left, from the right hip into the right heel, and from the left hip to the left heel. And how do you perceive? How does it feel? How long does your right leg feel? And how long does your left leg feel? Which leg, which heel feels further away from you? Further away from your hip? And what's the relationship to how you perceive the length of your torso? And how does it relate to how you perceive the length of your arm? Is there any relationship? They're both on they're both long on the same side, or the opposite? One leg, on the leg is longer, and then the opposite side of the arm is longer, or they're both same size, longer and shorter. So spread your legs apart, and if you can keep your legs long, that's great. But if you don't, you can't, and you have to bend your legs, and sometimes you can bend your legs. But if you're okay to have your legs a little bit wider apart, not so wide, but just a little bit wider than where you start. And so from there, and slowly and move your right heel away from your hip. So moving away from your hip, downward, and let it go. Okay, as if somebody is standing at your left foot, and then gently pulling your left leg away from your hip. Not tagging so hard, just gently pulling your leg away from your hip, and then let it go. And notice how does that move through you as you gently move and push your left heel away from your hip downward, and then when you let go. So the moment that you move your heel away from your hip, and what does that do to you? Where do you sense the movement? Besides your heel. You feel any movement in your hip, in your pelvis, that go through your torso, that go through your spine, anything that you sense. Okay, and now switch legs and do it a few times. And slowly you're going to push your left heel away from your hip, left heel away from the hip, downward, and then let it go. And make sure to do it very gently. It's not stretching, okay? You're not really trying to push as hard as you can, and don't think about trying to tighten the muscles and trying to push the leg in as far as you can. We're talking about like maybe just not even a 1 inch, tiny movement. But you're really listening for what does that do and how does it change the other parts and the rest of you as you begin to slide and move your left heel away from the hip downward. How does that move through you, if there's anything? If you don't feel anything, and that's okay. I'm just asking you so that you can pay attention and to observe what you might notice, okay? And leave that. Bring both arms out to the side, about the shoulder height on the floor. Okay. Bring your arms out to the side at the shoulder height on the floor. Okay, so leave your arms there, and then bring your left hand on the front of your right shoulder. Left hand, place your left hand, on the front of your right shoulder. And from there, very gently, and begin to slide your left hand towards the direction of your right hand. You don't have to touch your right hand, but moving towards that direction, sliding, and then bring it back to the front of your right shoulder. So nice, easy movement, sliding, just pressing your right arm with your left hand without effort. So the hand always, your left hand always stays on your right arm, sliding along your right arm. And do it slowly while you do that movement, and do not strain yourself. It's so easy if you become fixated and trying to go and to make yourself to reach and go as far as you can possibly, and then it's easy to strain yourself. And that's really not that's not the purpose, right? That's not the goal. So, but you are looking for ease and comfort. And how do you do that? And when does the movement become difficult? When does your hand stop? And when the movement becomes difficult, where do you feel the difficulty? Where do you feel the challenge and obstacle? In what part? And do the movement slowly. Maybe you can start to sense that. What part of yourself is moving and participating? And what part of you is not participating in the movement? So if you notice that, and it is absolutely fine that it's not quite clear. You're not quite sure how you're moving, but I'll be still asking lots of questions, and then it starts to make more sense as you're moving along and going through this sequence. So now stop and go and switch hands, please. Put your left arm out to the side at the shoulder height on the floor, and place your right hand on the front of your left shoulder. So the same movements, but the first time, especially the first time, pay attention. And how does it go to this side, this way? What is it different? I bet it's very different going these directions. Easier or harder? Okay, so the left arm out to the side on the floor, and then the right hand on the front of your left shoulder, and then starting to slide your right hand to the left towards the left hand, and then slide it back and repeat that movement. And slowly and gently, if you feel the strain, okay, do less. Okay? You're going to actually, eventually, you're going to be able to move further, but not by increasing effort, but by learning to improve the coordination. How you coordinate the entire self. It is always a way to improve the movement, not by working harder, not by pushing through discomfort. So what's the difference in the quality of the movement on this way? Does it move easier? Does it move more difficult? And what's different? Just curiously, and you are paying attention to notice maybe there's something, the way that you use yourself and different this way compared to the other way that makes it easier or harder. What is it making it easier? Or what is it making it harder? All right. And bring your arms down to your side on the floor and let's rest your arms. And while you're resting, feel free to bend up your legs if you like. If you prefer to have your legs long the whole time, feel free. Okay, put both legs down long again and just spread your legs apart slightly, not too wide apart, just a little bit wider than your normal lying down positions. And this time, bring your right arm, just the right arm, out to the side on the floor at the shoulder height. Then actually, let's go a little bit past the shoulder height. So somewhere between the shoulder height and the head. And so about overhead, but not quite too high. Okay, so just a little bit past the shoulder height on the floor. Okay, so leave your arm there. If your shoulder agrees with you, leave your arm there. If that's too hard, you can bring your arm at the shoulder height. But from there, and begin to reach your right hand, okay, not the left hand. You're not doing anything with your left hand. Okay, so leave your right hand on the floor and begin to lengthen your right arm. Okay, so that as if you're reaching your right hand upward, okay, away from your head, reaching up on the floor. You're not lifting your arm, you're just gliding, sliding your hand on the floor. That's a small movement, so don't strain yourself again. I repeat over and over, but it's so easy to strain and work too much. So try not to work too much. And if your shoulder becomes a little uncomfortable, give yourself a break and bring your arm down and rest and come back to the movement. It's a tiny movement. It's tiny, tiny movement. Okay, and think about. I remind everybody to slow down and do less, but I keep saying that because I really mean it. It's slow down and do less. Okay, even if you're thinking so slow, even if you're thinking that you are moving so small, I'm going to challenge you to do even less. How small the movement can you make, and can you still feel the movement? Can you still feel the movement? So lengthening. And what happens when you lengthen your arm? Lengthen your right arm. And how does that move through you? Where do you sense the movement? What happens to your arm and what happens to anything in the middle, your spine, your ribs? You sense any changes? Okay, and bring your right arm down to your side on the floor, and then switch arms. Bring your left arm above, just past the shoulder height on the floor, and leave your left arm on the floor, and begin to do the same movement and lengthening, slowly lengthening your left arm. Okay. How does your left arm lengthen, and how is it different from the right side? How is it? What's your experience? Which arm do you like? The way that you can move and the way that you sense that lengthening, which side feels more pleasant, more comfortable? And what is that in that quality, and what makes up that quality? There is something that makes up that quality. If you like the way that it feels on this side, what is it? With that movement of your arm, okay, and with that movement of the arm, is that shape of your spine, does it change? And how does it change? That the shape of your ribs change. So how does it change? And slowly bring your arms down, and then switch arms again. Right arm up high on the floor, up just past the shoulder height. And this time, when you lengthen your right arm, okay, when you lengthen your right arm, press your right pelvis to the floor. At the same time, you lengthen your right arm. And what does that do? When you push the right, when you press the right side of the pelvis to the floor, as you lengthen your right arm. Okay, so the left side of the pelvis is actually lifts away from the floor, so the pelvis actually turns to the right as you lengthen your right arm. Okay, so as if the whole spine and the whole body is starting to turn to the right. Then if that starts to come together, and then can you just imagine that lengthening your arm invites the spine, ribs, and the pelvis and to turn into that directions. Just think about that. It may make sense, it may not make sense, but just think that is maybe what's happening when you lengthen your right arm, and that everything starts to kind of turn towards the right. Okay. And now slowly switch sides and switch arms. Bring your right arm down and bring your left arm up on the floor and start to do the same movements. Lengthening your left arm. And at the same time, you are pushing and pressing your left side of the pelvis into the floor. Just as slightly. As if the whole body is starting to turn to the left. Now, how does that change your experience of doing this movement? And of course, this side feels quite different from the other side. Easier side, maybe a harder side for you. Okay. Just a few times. You can think about just doing a few more times, but lengthening your left arm is going to, as if you're going to invite the whole body to begin to turn to the left. So the spine, your ribs, and your pelvis and begin to turn with the slight suggestion of the lengthening your left arm. Just by thinking about that, does that change that sensation of the movement and experience of the movement? Okay. Bring your left arm down by your side, and if you wish, you can bend your legs up. And take a rest. Everyone's different. So I'm only giving you suggestions is based on how some people like, and so it doesn't mean that you have to do this way, but you may try it, and you may like it, you may not like it. You may like to keep your legs long the whole time. If that works for you, by all means, and do that way. Okay. Legs down long. Again, spread your legs apart slightly with your legs straight down, if that's okay. And bring your right arm at the shoulder height on the floor, only the right. And put your left hand on the front of your right shoulder, like you had it before. Okay. And similar to what you did last time, but when you slide your hand, left hand towards the right hand this time, and think about pushing your right side of the pelvis to the floor, as if the pelvis is turning to the right as you slide your the left hand towards the right hand. And notice what it does and how that changes the movement. So press the right side of the pelvis to the floor so the pelvis turns to the right as you slide your hand towards the right hand. Then as your hand slides further, then you may want to pay attention to your head. What do you do with your head? Do you keep your head still? Well, that's one option. Or you can let your head turn towards the right also. So notice how the sliding movement, okay, over your hand, and how does this shift? And how does the weight on your chest and your shoulders shift? And how does the weight on your pelvis, on your rib cage shift? Does the weight shift to the right side, or can you allow the weight to shift to the right side? So the whole body is then starting to turn to the right, and your hand goes further towards the right hand. Where does it stop? What keeps your hand from sliding closer to your right hand? It's not your shoulder. It is how the shoulder connects with your torso. Where does it stop? Okay. Wherever you feel the strain or the effort, and that's maybe where you're stopping. As the pelvis turn, or you're allowing the pelvis to turn. Now switch sides. Put your left arm out to the side on the floor and put your right hand on the front of your left shoulder and slide your hand, the right hand, towards the direction of your left hand. And so pay attention. How does it move through you? And where does the movement stop? And is it possible to invite more parts of yourself to participate into this movement? What is it making it impossible to move and slide your hand further? It's not your arm. It's not your shoulder. Does the pelvis turn? Or can you turn the pelvis? If the pelvis turns, then what happens to your hips? What happens to your heels? Do the feet turn? Or are you keeping the feet from turning? Or you can allow your legs, the entire legs, to turn to the left as well. And what do you do with your head? Lots of questions. What do you do with your head? And what do you do with your breathing? Do you hold your breath? Okay. Switch sides. Once again, put your right arm at the shoulder height. I'll make it a little bit easier. I think it does. It makes a little more sense for some people. And bend your left leg up. Only the left leg. Bend your left leg. Okay. Then as you slide your hand, as you slide your left hand towards the right hand, and lift your left hip away from the floor. Lift your left hip away from the floor so the pelvis can turn to the right, and so the hand can slide a little further to the right. And what's the connection? What's the connection? Okay, so it's making it a little bit easier, but repeat this way with the knee bent, with your left knee bent. But can you feel that connection? Look for connection from the hand, from your left hand to your hip. Okay, so initiate the movement from your hand, sliding, and then can you allow that movement to continue to go into the spine and into the hip, and so the pelvis, and then begin to turn. But it's a little bit easier with the knee bent like that, I think. Okay, and once that makes a little more sense with the knee bent, and when you come back and put your leg down long, so the both legs are straight. Okay, and same arm, same directions, and slide your hand to the right. Does that change the movement now? Okay, even with the legs long, does that movement become a little easier? Okay. If it did become easier, then that tells you it's just that you have learned that coordination. Your brain has learned that coordination. What was difficult and became a little easier, not because you stressed muscles, not because you improve flexibility, but because you improve coordination. Your nervous system has learned a different way to use yourself, and that has made what was difficult a little easier. Okay, now change the directions. Once again, left arm out to the side, and just the first few times, bend your right leg, and then put your right hand on the front of your left shoulder, and then as you slide your right hand towards the left hand, and lift your right hip so the pelvis turns to the left. Okay. So the brain's very smart. You learn that and it clicks, and then it's like nothing sometimes. Not always, but a lot of times it clicks, and then what a minute ago it seemed very difficult, and it becomes very easy. Okay, so one of the very famous quotes of the Feldenkrais and Moshe Feldenkrais is, make the impossible possible, the possible easy, the easy elegant. And this is what we're really doing for all the lessons. And now try with the legs straight. So put your right leg down straight and continue to slide your hand. And you can still find that connection of the hand to the pelvis. And then, well, what's the problem? It's easier now, is it? Okay, And let's take a rest. You can rest however you like, legs long, legs bent, or legs up in the air, whatever you like. Okay. But take a moment and notice your contact just for a moment. And how do you sense yourself? Spine, space, the amount of the contact. What's changed? If any change, what's changed? Okay, so we'll continue a little more similar movements, and let's bring your right arm out to the side, right arm out to the side, and place your left hand on the front of your right shoulder. Okay, and then first time you do the same movements, you slide your left hand towards the right hand, and then come back. Okay, and then the next time you slide your hand, but you go a little bit higher than your right hand, just a little bit higher than right hand. Reach just a little bit higher than your right hand. Then coming back. And each time, progressively, you're going to slide your hand a little higher and higher, but still on the floor. Okay, still, so you're not lifting, you're just sliding and touch the floor, and then continue to slide your hand, and then coming back. So changing the angle, you're going up a little higher and higher without increasing so much of an effort, but changing the direction of the reaching. And as you slide your hand up a little bit higher and follow with your eyes and look at your hand as you're sliding. And of course, you have to turn your head as well to make the movement a little easier. Okay? So follow with your head and your eyes where you're reaching and sliding. And how does that change the movements through you? It's not the same. When you change slight angle, it changes how the entire skeleton and organizes, and how you organize the entire skeleton. It's different. Right? And find easier way to move. And by slowing down the movements and then by allowing the whole movement and to go through you instead of trying to fight, work through difficult part. Okay, 1 or 2 more times. Slight change in the angle, but look for ease and comfort. Very good. And switch hands. Left arm on the floor at the shoulder height, and then starting with your right hand reaching towards the left hand, and then slide it back to the starting point. And each time progressively you are going to slide your right hand a little bit higher up, higher than your left hand, and then coming back and then go a little bit higher next time, and so forth. Of course, not to a limit and not to a place where you start to feel increased strain. Regardless of where you are reaching, you can find ease and comfort in any directions that you're reaching for. But you can't rush through that. You can't find that by working harder. You can find it by giving yourself more time and let your nervous system find a more efficient pathway, easier pathway. It'll find it for you. It's kind of nice. You don't have to think about trying to analyze a movement, but you got to pay attention. You've got to slow down. And then your nervous system will find it for you. So make sure to follow your hand with your head and your eyes. So be sure to watch where your hand is going. Then it works better. If your eyes are looking somewhere else, then it might change the quality of the movement. Okay, let's stop and put your arms down by your side and rest. Rest in with your legs either way, straight or bent. And by the way, you notice the weight distribution between the right side of the pelvis and left side of the pelvis, and how is the weight distributed now? And how was it when you started? Any difference? Bring your right arm at the shoulder height on the floor. And this time with the palm downward and facing the floor. Right hand, palm facing down the floor. And actually bring your right arm down just a little bit, not that far, but slightly lower than your shoulder height, just a little bit lower, and leave it there. And put your left hand on that right shoulder, on the front of the right shoulder, and begin to slide your hand towards the right hand. And this time, each time you are going to move and slide your hand lower than your right hand each time. So first you reach it completely different from what you did earlier. Now, but changing the direction, you're now going more towards downward. And notice what you had to do with your head. And so at some point, as you reach your hand and slide your hand lower, and you may feel like you need to lift your head, maybe. So if you feel like you need to lift your head, as you slide in your hand a little bit further downward on the floor. Okay, so make sure you look at your hand with your eyes. And that does help to organize the head and your chest. Okay, so going lower and lower down towards, let's see, towards the right hip somewhere, going towards that direction. And when do you want to lift your head? If you leave your head down on the floor, it gets in the way, it rolls, you can roll to the right side, but it kind of gets in the way of reaching and sliding your hand further down. So when do you want to lift your head? And can you, if you were to continue doing that movement, just imagine that maybe you are coming up onto your right elbow. Could you do that? May require some effort first. You may have to work hard, but eventually you'll find a way that you don't really have to work hard. So when do you press on your right elbow? Okay? And if you need to lower your right arm down to give you a little better leverage, and you can change the placement of your right arm, if that makes sense to you. Okay, just a couple more times. Just imagine or visualize that you will be coming up onto your right elbow, and then you'll be sitting in sideways. Instead of just rolling onto the front, you are coming up to sit sideways. Pushing up through your right elbow and coming up to sit. And feel free to make an adjustment as your arm positions if you need to change What does it make sense? What makes sense to you? It may not make sense right away, but maybe it does. Maybe it will. And now switch arms. Switch arms. So left arm a little bit lower than the shoulder height with the palm down facing the floor, and slide your right hand towards your left hand first, and then going further down each time with an intention to come up onto the left elbow eventually. You don't have to do it right away, but just think about where you're going, where you might be going. And to do that, what do you have to do with your head, with your eyes, with your spine, with your ribs, with your pelvis? It's not a simple movement. It's a very complex movement. Okay, it's not an easy thing to do. But once again, you don't have to think about that. You don't have to know how to do it. You just have to pay attention and slowly move and paying attention to quality of the movement. Quality of the movement. So what was it like? How smooth was that movement? And if it wasn't smooth, look for a smoother pathway. What is it making it not so smooth? What parts stops participating? And can you bring that part, whatever the part, what is not participating, now into the movement? Okay, and I'll have you alternate and going to the left side, coming up to sit, up onto the elbow, and then alternate and going to the right side, sliding your hand and coming up onto the right side of the elbow and to sit. If it is not possible, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it, okay? Moving towards that direction, and that's it. And there's always you can find a range moving into that range. That's fine. Whether you get there or don't get there, it's not a problem. Okay, it's not a problem. But be interested in knowing and feeling the difference. And what is it different? Right side, and how you transition to the right side and how you transition to the left side. It's not the same. Which side is easier? Why is it easier on one side? Why is it harder on the other side? What part? It's not the strength, it's not a flexibility. Well, not that much. Maybe a little bit, but not that much. It is a coordination. It is a coordination. What part of the coordination is making one side easier and making the other side harder? That's what I want you to be more interested in, rather than trying to become so fixated on being able to, I'm going to come up to sit. I'm going to come up to sit. Whether you can do it or not, it's not that important. Okay, if you do one more time, and then you're going to lie on your back. And stay on your back and rest just for a moment. Now, I only have one more thing, a last one, okay? Just have fun, and you can't do it, no problem, but just have fun. Lift both arms up in the air towards the ceiling. Okay. Hold your arms there and lift both legs, bend your legs first, bend your legs up, and then lift both legs up in the air. Okay, you can have your legs, a little straight or a little bent, that's fine. And now begin to roll onto the right side. So you're going to roll onto the right side and kind of push yourself back. You can use the momentum and then bring yourself back and roll back onto your back, okay? All right, and then just once go to the left side. roll, okay? And the next time you do this movement and rolling onto the right side, come up to sit. Come up to sit gracefully, maybe. And do that just a couple of times, going to the right side and then going to the left side, and find more gracefulness and more smoothness and more fun, and just have fun, okay? It's nothing to get stressed about. Just rolling on the mat, on the floor. And nobody's gonna care whether you can roll well or not. Just have fun, okay? If you like the way that you roll onto the one side, which side do you like? And what part? And what part of the rolling that you like, and what's the quality? What's in that side that you like? Okay, and can you bring that quality into the other side somehow? It's kind of fun things that kids do, right, all the time. No purpose. They're not really trying to learn to roll gracefully or anything, just being silly and be playful, fun, and that's enough. Okay, lie down, legs long, and the last time I'm going to scan once again, and I'd like you to notice your contact and changes from the beginning to now. Recall how much the spine touched the floor when you started and how much the spine touched the floor now. Is there any difference? And how's the weight? And how does the floor receive you now? Does the floor feel differently now than it did start? Does it feel a little more friendly? Feels a little nicer to you? How's it different? How do you sense the floor? Does it have a different quality? All right, so in a second, slowly, you're going to come up to sit. You can use the same movement you like, okay? Rolling onto the side. Which side do you roll to? Kind of think. Do you roll to the right? Do you roll to the left? Which way do you go spontaneously? Do you have a choice? Can you roll either way with the same ease? So come up to sit and stand. And take your time. Once you stand up, don't rush, okay? I don't want you to get dizzy, lose your balance, and feel lightheaded or anything like that. So take your time, and once you stand up and stand on the floor or the mat, and just stay there with your feet shoulder width apart or so, and sense the floor and sense balance and stability. How does the floor support you? How do you sense the ground? And take a walk around your room and notice yourself walking, and how do you sense yourself from walking? Is there anything different? Quality of the walking. How does your body participate in walking? What's the coordination relationship between your arms and torso and your legs? How do they work together? Okay. And